You ever seen an 8-year-old sit in first class like she owns the sky? That's exactly what happened that morning, and honestly, I wish you could have seen the looks on their faces. Sierra's legs were swinging back and forth, her backpack tight against her chest, while grown men were fighting for overhead bin space, and a woman in pearls was already sighing loud enough for the whole row to hear. The thing is, Sierra wasn't just another kid, but you wouldn't have guessed that, seeing her a faded hoodie and those sneakers that blinked blue every time she tapped her toes. She had headphones on, sketchbook open, already sketching something wild like dragons wearing business suits. You know how kids' imaginations run. But what nobody realized not yet, at least, was that Sierra Langston, this little girl with eyes too serious for her age, was about to flip the whole flight on its head. See, her parents were the kind who could buy the whole plane if they wanted, tech billionaires who believed their daughter needed to know the world for herself. So instead of a private jet or fancy nanny, they put her on this commercial flight, said it would build character. There was security, of course you just wouldn't spot them. They dressed like any other tired traveler. Sierra was on her way to surprise her grandparents for their anniversary, clutching a first-class ticket with her name printed bold as day. But as more people boarded, I could sense at the sideways glances, the quiet snickers. Some folks smiled politely, sure, but most of them just looked past her like she was lost, like she'd wandered up from coach by mistake. That's when she walked in, you know the type, sharp suit, lips painted like she was late for a magazine cover, eyes that could freeze water. She spotted Sierra in seat 3A, and, man, I saw it all play out before she even said a word. She leaned down, voice syrupy and sharp. "Honey, you must be lost. Coach is that way." Now, Sierra's hand was shaking a little, but she lifted her boarding pass right up, said, as clear as she could, "It says 3A. You'd think that would settle it, right?" "Nope." The woman snatched the ticket and flagged down a flight attendant. Suddenly, it was a full production whispers up and down the aisle, everyone pretending not to watch but staring all the same. The attendant hesitated, glanced at the pass, then said, "Sweetie, maybe you were given the wrong one. Why don't you come with me?" You ever seen the air go out of room? That's what happened. Some folks gasped, one guy muttered, "She's just a kid," but nobody stood up, nobody said, "Let her be." Sierra didn't move, just sat there, quiet as a question nobody wanted to answer. Meanwhile, the security team back in coach gave a look, but didn't step in. They knew this wasn't the moment. The attendant called for supervisor. The supervisor radioed Sierra's name, and that's when the co-pilot's face went pale. He started flipping through his manifest, whispering something into his earpiece. Then, over the intercom, "All passengers, please remain seated. We're experiencing a short delay due to a security concern." That's when things got real, not just for Sierra, but for everyone on that plane. The woman trying to steal her seat? She crossed her arms and looked around like she'd been wronged by the universe. But then came the sirens. You could hear them, faint at first, getting louder, and before anyone could make sense of it, the jet bridge filled with footsteps. FBI agents. Not kidding. Calm, collected, like they'd seen this movie before. One leaned in and said, clear as day, "Miss Sierra Langston, we've been notified of a potential threat to your safety. Please remain in your seat." Now, if you'd seen the face of that woman, the one who started it, you'd know she was about to faint right there in 3A. She tried to protest, saying it was a mistake, but the agents weren't there for her. They asked her to step off the plane, calm but firm, and for the first time, she looked small. Cameras came out. Passengers started whispering some in sympathy, some, honestly, just loving the drama. She wasn't being arrested, no, but she was being removed for interfering with a minor's federally protected travel. That's a mouthful, but you could see what it really meant. You don't get to decide who belongs here. Not today. The agent turned to Sierra, a voice soft, almost apologetic. "Sorry for the disturbance, Miss Langston. The flight may continue." As the woman was escorted out, Sierra didn't say a word, didn't cry. She just sat up straighter, adjusted her backpack, and tucked her sketchbook under her arm. It was the quietest act of defiance I've ever seen. The whole plane had watched, and not one person could say she didn't belong anymore. Not after that. Funny thing is, Sierra didn't need to raise her voice, didn't need to explain herself. Her presence was the answer. By the time we landed, someone had already posted a video. You know how it goes. It spreads like wildfire. But the story wasn't about some dramatic argument or a child throwing a fit. It was about dignity. It was about what happens when you have every right to a space and the world still asks you to prove it. The airline issued an apology, the flight attendant was suspended, and people started arguing on the internet. Was it racism? Was it just a misunderstanding? Who gets to decide who sits where? But none of that really mattered to Sierra. She got off that plane and walked straight into her grandparents' arms, still holding that sketchbook, still silent. They didn't know, not at first, what had happened. But the world did. Because sometimes racism isn't someone yelling. Sometimes it's a whisper, a smirk, a doubt, a rule that gets twisted just enough to shut you out. And sometimes it takes an 8-year-old with light-up shoes to remind us what it looks like to claim your space, even when everyone else says you don't belong. So let me ask you, next time you see a kid like Sierra, sitting somewhere you don't expect, what will you do? Will you speak up? Will you stay quiet? Or will you be the one who decides that everyone gets to belong, no matter what story you think you know? Tell me where you're watching from, city, country, wherever you are. And if this story got you thinking, let's talk about it down below. Who gets to decide who belongs? And what would you have done if you were there?